Hello and welcome to the next reading of From Christmas Carols, Village Green to Church Choir by Andrew Gant. This is the 30th of December reading, and we did 6, 7 and 8. Now 9 is O Come All Ye Faithful, which I've already read. Tonight's reading is 10, 11 and 12. And the 31st reading is Carol 13 and Carol 15. And the New Year's Day, we'll jump ahead, we'll do the 19th Carol and the last 3. And that will be done in the morning of the 1st of January, because I'm hoping to do a new series starting from Sunday the 4th. So the first one we read today, it's in the section "And there were shepherds abiding in the fields." So naturally it's while shepherds watched their flocks by night to start with. And that's it begins on page 107. And I'm going to read the lyrics. So, while shepherds watched their flocks by night, all seated on the ground, the angel of the Lord came down, and glory shone around. Now, I've been looking at the tune Cranbrook, which is rather repetitive. The tune I'm looking at is Winchester Old. So, verse 2, "Fear not, said he, for mighty dread has ceased their troubled mind. Glad tidings of great joy I bring to you and all mankind." The language of the day was mankind. It's to you and all. To you and all of us. Of course, mankind, it's all human beings. So, to you in David's town this day is born of David's line the Saviour, who is Christ the Lord, and this shall be the sign. The heavenly babe you there shall find, to human view displayed, all meanly wrapped in swathing bands, and in a manger laid. Thus spake the seraph, and forthwith appeared a shining throng of angels praising God, and thus addressed their joyful song. All glory be to God on high, and to the earth be peace, goodwill, henceforth from heaven to man begin and never cease. A review of all the tunes and musical settings of While Shepherds Watched, or if you got your in school, it was While Shepherds Washed Their Socks by Night. It would easily fill a book twice the length of this one. It would be worth it. There are hundreds. The names alone conjure up the magic of place, people and association which these tunes evoke. Fernbank, Tom's Boy, Old Foster, Comfort, Liverpool, Leicester, Lingham, Lloyd, Hale, Chime On, Morchard Bishop, Zadok, St Cloud, Roadwater, Martinstown, Pentonville, Ford, Bampton, Bolton, Bedford, Otford, Cambridge New, Canterbury, Cabin, Carolina, Adderley, Greetland, Christchurch or St Christchurch, Redroof. Some can only be partially identified. The old beer tune, an old ranter melody, a tune sung by the carolers at Barton St David, another from the Thomas Hardy family manuscript. One is called simply Christmas. Their musical styles, too, allow glimpses into all sorts of corners of English life in its communal musical voice. Some have the sonorous 3-part harmony, tune doubled at the octave by tenors, which grew directly out of the old medieval technique of improvising a harmony around a familiar tune, when ordinary parish singers largely didn't sing from books because they couldn't afford them, couldn't read them, and had anyway known these tunes since before they didn't learn to read. Some have fancy little instrumental symphonies and sturdy two-part figures striding between melody and bass in the middle, in the West Gallery or Sacred Heart Manor. Many are folk songs. Some are borrowed from other hymns. The Shropshire Funeral Hymn is in a minor key, with the rich modal harmonies and expressive shifts of chord reminiscent of Tallis. Some versions, typically for carols, use a variant of the words. One or two add a refrain, like the splendid sweet chiming bells, which instead of telling the shepherds to fear not, wants them to cheer up, faithful shepherds, cheer up, which is much more the sort of thing a sturdy English angel would have said under the circumstances, as well as lending itself to all sorts of musical swaddling. The text is ripe for schoolyard parody. English readers of a certain age will remember versions from their own childhood, usually involving socks and changing channels on the TV. No doubt there are many others. One elderly singer recorded in the early 1970s has, while shepherds watched their peas and ops all boiling in the pot, a lone angel came falling down and spoiled the jolly lot. The key to this hymn's enduring popularity must lie in its universality and its simplicity. It's about ordinary people and ordinary things. Sheep, fields, men sitting on the ground about to tuck into their sandwiches and finding themselves caught up in a rather surprising bit of the Christmas story. It's engaging, characterful and full of joy. When we sing the Christmas story, the shepherds are us. It tells its familiar tale in language which is simple and direct. There are no words longer than 2 syllables, and even those tend to be clear, expressive adjectives, adverbs and nouns, colouring in the narrative in bright primary colours: mighty, meanly, troubled, glory. Modernisers should take note. Humankind might tick certain boxes, but mankind is shorter, and it's what the man wrote. It's impossible then to attempt here anything approaching a comprehensive review of the history of this unassuming little gem. A closer look at just 2 of its many musical incarnations will pretty much tell the entire history of congregational singing in England. The story begins in the very earliest days of the Reformation. Christopher Tye was a fine composer for the old Latin rite of the pre-Reformation Catholic Church. Unlike some of his contemporaries, he was also an enthusiastic Protestant. When Edward VI, the boy king, came to the throne in 1547, Tye embraced the opportunities for musical innovation presented by the devout reformist boy king. Edward wanted his words in English, and his music simple enough not to get in the way of the words. Tye responded with a metrical version of the Acts of the Apostles, set to his own music, 4 parts, little repetition, no drawing out of words for musical effect. The idea was that moralising little devotional verses of this kind could be sung at home, by anybody, for entertainment and spiritual enlightenment, and they were enormously popular. Literary quality, unfortunately, did not always keep up with popularity. Tye was no Thomas Cranmer. Which said, ye men of Galilee, who gaze ye up in vain, thus Jesus thus uptake from us, this Jesus thus uptake from us, shall thus come down again. Routley describes Tye's verses as, from the literary point of view, pure stuffed owl from end to end. Notwithstanding his rather clunky versifying, for our purposes the interest of Tye's acts lies in the mean, top part of the second half of his setting of chapter 8, which goes, I can't read it, but it's there. Try singing it from and through the regions crept, note that middle C is on the lowest line of the stave, sound familiar. The story now proceeds with the progress of popular psalm singing through the reign of Elizabeth I and beyond. Tye arranged his verses in common metre, that is, 4-line stanzas in a pattern of 8-6-8-6 syllables. The vast majority of the vast number of versions of the psalms produced at this time used the same metre. Any psalm could be sung to any tune in the same metrical pattern. The practice of mixing and matching texts and melody, such a creative and confusing a part of this history, was born. At the same time, bits of tunes could migrate from one setting to another, or sometimes two could be sung at once if their harmonies matched, or even if they didn't quite. Congregations, and no less importantly, families, could sing their favourite psalms to tunes they already knew and liked. The one whose sense suits Mount Ephraim, as Thomas Hardy later put it, or the one which Dad knows the chords to on the ferrobow, or the kids can manage on the household chest of viols. The whole book of Psalms, begun in Edward's reign, went through many hundreds of printings in the following century and a half, gathering well-known tunes like Ein Festeburger. As it went, Queen Elizabeth allowed an hymn, meaning a psalm, to be sung before and after, but not during the actual service. But their content was strictly limited to the items in the whole book: canticles, creed, Lord's Prayer, psalms, and one or two other suitable texts, but no Christmas carols, certainly not. To the new breed of Puritan parson, our semi-pagan country cousins are still a thing for the churchyard, not the church. The ongoing popularity of psalm singing presented considerable opportunities to the musical entrepreneur. Thomas East was a printer, and in 1592 he issued a psalter. As usual, he shuffled the pack of tunes and texts to meet his market, and included a number of tunes not seen before in print. One of them, by the curious process of cross-referencing and borrowing familiar to anyone who has dabbled in folk traditions, is based on Ty's mean part of 40 years before, tune in the tenor as was customary. East also continued the slightly eccentric habit of the English psalter makers of naming their tunes after a favourite place, or some other reference entirely unconnected with its text. He called this one Winchester, later rechristened Winchester Old, when someone decided to use the name Winchester New for the tune to the Advent hymn On Jordan's Bank, the Baptist's Cry. In 1696, a new psalm book eventually arrived to supersede the old one. The new text, printed without tunes, was by Nicholas Brady and the poet laureate Nahum Tate. Their book was quickly followed by a supplement in which they allowed themselves just one, Christmas hymn, which they called Song of the Angels at the Nativity of Our Blessed Saviour. Like Ty before them, they adopted the time-honoured practice of putting a suitable section of the biblical narrative into a nice, manageable metrical scheme for easy, practical singing to a familiar tune. The parish clerk bellowing out each line for the congregation to repeat in a technique known as lining out, a splendidly practical bit of communal music-making which has the added advantage of saving money on books. The poem, Whilst Shepherds Watched Their Flocks by Night, is usually ascribed to Tate, and it was the only Christmas carol which could legally be sung in English churches for most of the rest of the 18th century, which is at least partly why it caught on quite as spectacularly as it did. Another reason is Tate and Brady's instinctive genius for simplicity. Many carols have been fiddled around with by subsequent editors and strangers. Not this one. It doesn't need it. Apart from their first word, which has perhaps permissibly elided from their whilst to the slightly less sibilant while over the years, this is the very first English carol which we still sing in the version in which its authors wrote it. 300 years and counting, Tate and Brady's cheery little message of goodwill really does look as if it might begin and never cease. Through its roots in the psalm traditions of the 16th to the early 18th centuries, While Shepherds Watched really does tell, all by itself, the story of a particular strand of the history of congregational singing in England. By their masterstroke of setting their texts in a simple, well-known metre, its authors allowed it to spread its wings through the late 18th and 19th centuries and on into the 20th, forming local alliances with favourite tunes in virtually every village, church, nonconformist chapel, brass band and fireside snug in England. The results are rich, varied, personal and deeply moving. Just one will have to stand representative here. Thomas Clarke was a Canterbury cobbler. In 1805 he published a set of psalm and hymn tunes with some select pieces and an anthem, including an irresistibly jolly melody in common metre, with the last 2 lines repeated, which he set to the hymn, "Grace 'tis a charming sound." By the usual process of singers cheerfully nicking a tune to sing to different words with the same metre, his melody soon found itself attached to Tate's lyric while shepherds watched. And in this incarnation it gained widespread use, including in Dorset and the West Country, which it has steadfastly hung on to more or less ever since. Clarke spent much of his long life making music in parish churches and Sunday schools around Canterbury, and his tune bears the name of a pretty little town on the A229 between Maidstone and Winchester, Hastings, where perhaps he wrote it one shady afternoon under the flinty bulk of the old church, the scent of hops wafting gently across the weald, or taught it one Sunday morning to the children of the parish, accompanied by their uncles and cousins on serpents, clarinets and harmoniums. The tune and the town are called Cranbrook. Oddly, this tune, with its roots in the hop fields of Kent, has ended up as the unofficial national anthem of Yorkshire. Some 50 years after Clarke wrote his melody, the members of Halifax Parish Church Choir were on a day out to Ilkley Moor. As singers do, they whiled away the journey by singing their own, not very religious words to their favourite hymn tunes. The story goes that they improvised a lyric about a man who chose to woo his girlfriend out on the moor without taking the obvious precaution of wearing a hat, leading indirectly to their both being eaten by ducks. The song in the local dialect is on Ilkley Moor, bat at, a curious example of a folk song, appearing to evolve from a composed song rather than the other way round. It's one detail in the history of one song. On its own, it barely even hints at the extent of the melodic peregrinations of this carol around England, a sort of musical Mr. Pickwick, picking up friends as it goes. It met its long-term partner, the tune of Winchester, probably in the 19th century. In America, it hooked up with an arrangement of an operatic number by Handel, but the full richness and variety of its history will, like the Shepherds, have to wait. And carol number 11, I honestly cannot remember hearing this at all, but it sounds like While Shepherds Watch Their Flocks by Night. But it's called the Fleecy Care. While shepherds watched their fleecy care, a heavenly angel did appear. Shepherds, attend to you, I bring glad tidings of a newborn king, glad tidings of a newborn king. In Bethlehem's town this blessed morn, a Saviour of mankind is born, born of a spotless virgin pure, free from all sin and guile secure. In swaddling clothes this babe behold, no costly garb his limbs enfold. Laid in a manger, there you will find the great Redeemer of mankind. Arise, your tender care forsake, with hasty steps your journey take. To David's city, there you will see the pattern of humanity. To save us from eternal death, the great Messiah came to earth. Then let us with united voice sing Alleluia, all rejoice. And this is only about 3 pages long, this one. Carols are a body of songs which everybody knows. Within that corpus, some carols can have many local variants. Some of those variants can be seen as genuinely separate items in their own right. The Fleecy Care is clearly a version of While Shepherds Watched. It is, however, also right and proper to consider it as a discrete piece, mainly because it has 8 syllables to each of its 4 lines, instead of the 8686 common metre of While Shepherds Watched, and can't therefore be sung to any of the host of tunes associated with Tate and Brady's original. In both words and music, this is a different song, and it's a beauty. The secret appears to lie buried somewhere in 18th century Warwickshire. Roy Palmer, along with Bob and Jacqueline Patton, Reg Hall, Bob Copper, Keith Summers, Steve Roud and others have continued the task begun by Vaughan Williams, Cecil Sharp and A.L. Lloyd in collecting folk songs from all round the country. They are among the heroes of English music, and the fruits of their garnerings, held mainly by the English Folk Dance and Song Society at the appropriately named Cecil Sharp House in Chalk Farm, Camden, and in the British Library Sound Archive are a limitless treasure house of local genius. Palmer found the Fleecy Care in Napton, in Shakespeare country. He has this to say about it. Many villages have carols which they claim as their own. In some cases, these are local variants of standard items. In others, survivors from now forgotten hymnals, and occasionally genuinely unique. This one comes, I believe, into the last category. The 18th century connection can be found in another part of Warwickshire, just 25 miles or so from Napton in Nuneaton. Joseph Key was an exciseman by profession, and one of the army of well-educated, highly practical amateur musicians who brought something of the academic, learned style of music making to the parish choir and village band as they gathered in the west gallery of their local church every Sunday. Key died in 1784, and just a year later a collection of his compositions was issued by a London publisher. The contents page gives a pretty good feel of the musical reach of a medium-sized provincial parish church in a prosperous market town like Nuneaton. 5 anthems, 4 collects, 20 psalm tunes. At one end of the scale of musical elaboration, the anthems are artful little things, designed to be performed with a small group of instruments, with elegant symphonies in the Handel style, and tuneful solo sections for the parish's most accomplished singers. The rank-and-file members of the choir, no doubt peering jealously from behind their copies, waiting for the chorus at the end and wondering why they weren't picked to do the solo. At the other extreme, Key's psalm tunes are in the direct line of Protestant music making dating back to the 16th century, a tradition which, by this date, has descended into dullness. All the music celebrates the principle of inclusivity, of joining in, which has been such an important feature of the philosophy and practice of Protestant music since Luther. And, like Luther, one of the ways you can involve ordinary people into your musical worship is by using tunes they already know, folk songs. Key's anthem, As Shepherds Watch Their Fleecy Care, uses the same melody as the folk tune collected by Roy Palmer in nearby Napton 2 centuries later. In the approved Handelian manner, Key begins with the tune sung more or less straight by his soprano soloist, then turns it into something rather more elaborate, but it's unmistakably the same tune. The inference is that this tune and these words are a genuine local vernacular variant which found its way into the shared folk memory of both Joseph Key and of his musical descendant, who sang it to Roy Palmer, perhaps filtered through one of Palmer's forgotten hymnals on the way. There is a slightly self-conscious artfulness to the words, so perhaps there is the hand of a real poet hovering over them somewhere. Who knows? Whatever its genesis, this song has a gorgeous lilting quality, the repeated last line giving the tune a charmingly lopsided 5-line shape, the final arrival back at the key note teasingly delayed by the half-close at the end of the last line of text, resolved in the repetition. It is, at the same time, both a fascinating insight into an intensely local version of pastoral and a thing of beauty in its own right. And of course, the next one, carol number 12, Ding dong merrily on high, in heaven the bells are ringing. Ding dong, verily the sky is riven with angels singing. Glory, well, you know how it goes. Gloria, Hosanna in excelsis. In so here below, let steeple bells be swungen, and yo by priest and people be sungen. And the refrain, Gloria in excelsis, Hosanna in excelsis. Pray ye dutifully prime your matin chime, ye ringers. May ye beautifully rhyme your eve-time song, ye singers. Gloria, Hosanna in excelsis. So, in 1589, a manual of courtly dance was published by the Frenchman Toineau Arbeau. I apologise if I've got that wrong. That isn't his real name. He was actually a priest called Johann Tabourot. Toineau Arbeau is a pen name and an anagram of his real name, though the anagram doesn't quite work in modern spelling. You have to read I and J as the same letter, Latin style. His book is called Orchestrographie. Like so many of the productions of the new commercial presses across Europe, it is a thing of beauty, lavishly illustrated, carefully typeset on the page, with a gorgeous title page, florid dedication, and handsome initial letters draped in foliage, and classical deities. His course of instruction in how to apprendre à danser and battre le tambour is set out in the form of a dialogue between teacher and student, the approved method derived from Socrates and much used at the time, for example by Thomas Morley and our Scots friend John Forbes in their textbooks of music theory. The teacher is the pseudonymous author Arbeau, the pupil a young man named Capriole. It's a charming and extremely interesting book. It tells you how to tie and carry a large drum and a sword, and what different national styles of drumming are like, and gives extensive and detailed information about all sorts of dances, complete with woodcuts of a rather self-conscious young couple in full fig during the saute maillot and the pied en l'air. There. There is a great deal of music, painstakingly set up in movable type, beautifully clear. There are drum rhythms, plenty of tunes for fife and flute, and a gorgeous little love song for voices in 4 parts. Above all, there are airs, dance tunes. Arbeau classifies these according to the type of dance: the courante, the basse danse, the gaillard. Within these classifications, many of the tunes have names: Air de la Gaillard appelée Amphionnette, Branle de Poitou. Some of the names imply a foreign origin: the Pavane d'Espagne, and the Air de la Gaillard appelle La Traditor Mifa Morlier, or something like that. Peter Warlock made memorable use of these melodies in his Capriole suite for strings. Stravinsky drew on these resources too in his ballet Agon, with somewhat spikier results. They're folk tunes. The publication brings together a wealth of tunes bursting with what Cecil Sharp would have recognised as the unconscious art of the folk musician, very like its almost exact contemporary Pie Canciones. It's wonderful stuff. There are many more riches waiting to be mined here. Towards the end of the book, Arbeau sets out his detailed dance steps alongside the melodies which go with them. This gives him an interesting problem: how to present the dance steps, which need to be read top to bottom, in proper alignment with the matching notes. That's good, isn't it? And beats of the music, which is read left to right. He comes up with an ingenious solution: Put the musical stave vertically down the side of the page with the steps alongside. If you're confused, that's what I mean. Brilliant. Among his last dances are a set of the type known as the branle d'escosse, the branle de pois, the branle coupe, nom Cassandre, each with its own detailed directions for dancing, as explained in an exchange between our young pupil and a by now apparently rather exasperated teacher. Capriole, comment dansiez-vous ce branle que vous dicte? Ah bon, vous ne verrez pas le tabulateur. Right at the end is a florid little melody, stretching vertically over 2 pages with the grand-sounding name Branle de l'Official. The story now moves on 300 years and 400 miles north into familiar curriculum vitae territory for the English carol. A folk tune of indeterminate origin, nothing whatever to do with Christmas, is discovered in an old book by an English clergyman who adds words in a suitably old-fashioned style, publishes it in a carol book, and thus places it smack in the middle of our Christmas carol repertoire as if it had been there all its life, where it has stayed ever since. George Ratcliffe Woodward belongs firmly in the tradition of idealistic High Church Anglican priests, scholars and hymn writers who feature so strongly in this story. He served his ministry at St Barnabas, Pimlico, and at Little Walsingham in Norfolk, where he would sometimes play the euphonium in procession through the ruined Abbey gateway and along the muddy edges of the turnip fields to the shrine, the Anglican one, of course. Like Sabin Baring Gould, he wrote voluminously about saints and legends and published books of poems. Like the earlier great partnership of Helmore and Neale, he was fascinated by plain song, Renaissance music and the traditions of Orthodox Christianity. Like them too, he was part of a creative double act with a long-term musical collaborator, his Cambridge friend and fellow Caen, Charles Wood. Between them, their many books of Christmas music represent, alongside Sharp, the most important contributions to the repertoire between Helmore and Neale, and the later work of Vaughan Williams, Percy Dermer, and Martin Shaw. Ding Dong Merrily on High first appeared in the Cambridge Carol book in 1924. The words are by Woodward, the tune is Albou's Branle de l'Official, harmonised by Wood with all his fastidious professorial craftsmanship. Woodward's text has all the hallmarks of the received carol writer's style. There is the inverted syntax, in heaven, the bells are ringing, the archaic vocabulary, e'en so, verily, e'en so, even so, verily, or truly, riven. Woodward originally wrote The Sky is Rent with Angels Singing, which was perhaps a bit obscure and possibly a bit violent even for his choristers and congregations. Verb forms borrowed from Old English, sungen and swungen. Above all, there is the fondness for dropping in a Latin refrain, in direct imitation of the macaronic carols of the 15th century, Gloria, Hosanna in Excelsis. This creates a seemingly endless melisma, where a single syllable is sung to an extended musical phrase. Other carols with roots in French popular song have this feature too, and it gives them a very distinctive character. It works. No doubt the harmonious marriage of tune and words derives much of its appeal from the influence of one of Woodward's hobbies, bell ringing, if not from his other, beekeeping. The words are in truth a bit odd. It's one of the curiosities of this history that some of the wilder flights of Victorian versifying have had much scorn heaped down on their heads, while others, including this one, have apparently passed the test of public acceptability without comment. It doesn't always seem logical, but of course liking something doesn't need logic. Woodward's words swing along very happily. The syllables matched gratefully to the chattering rhythm of the verses between the fluid legato refrain. It's short and a welcome chance for the choir to sing something fast. Perhaps all this matters just as much as the words actually meaning anything. One of the interesting things about scraping away at the history of the music is the chance to experience these tunes as they were before they became the carols we know today. Often this means singing them to completely different words. In this case it means getting up out of your chair and dancing the branle. Try it. Arbu gives us the clearest possible lesson in how to do it, a sort of 16th century exercise video. Pied gauche lagi means put your left foot out. Petit sol is a little jump. Pied droit approche is bring your right foot in. Pieds oinks, whatever that means, is feet together. Then you make a double à droite, do the same 4 steps to the right. Then when you're happy with that, you can empoigner la femme par le sol du corps, grab the lady round the waist. Les levant and l'air pour la faire sauter, pick her up as if she's jumping. Then and pause. Très bien. It might not go in your carol service, but it should be fun at the party afterwards. Alors, encore une fois, 1, 2, 3. And there it is. It doesn't sound... Is it like the hokey cokey, I wonder? Well, that's it. That's enough for the fun. For the 31st, as I said, I'm going to do Angels from the Realms of Glory, the Christ Child's Lullaby, and have we had we have had Away in a Manger, yes. So what I was going to do was do Angels from the Realms of Glory, the Christ Child's Lullaby, and then I think I might look up Of the Father's Heart Begotten, and then on the 1st of January do Here We Come a Wassailen, and do another of my favourite hymns. I got a message which said we haven't had a Sydney Carter carol. Well, when I do the Here We Come a Wassailen, I will add the Sydney Carter classic, which I used to sing as a child, Standing in the Rain. And that doesn't sound very Christmassy, but believe you me, it is. Then on the 5th of January, 12th night, I shall do the 12 Days of Christmas, but I shall go back a bit and do one of the most obvious ones we haven't had, Once in Royal David City. I might actually do that one on New Year's Day instead of 5th of January, so it makes it closer to Christmas. In fact, I might actually do that. Angels from the Realms of Glory. I might do Once in Royal David City with Angels from the Realms of Glory and the Christ Child's Lullaby. And then on 1st of January do Here We Come a Wassailen and Standing in the Rain, and the 12 Days of Christmas, and do Of the Father's Heart Begotten, because that's the 12th night, the last time really you can sing a Christmas carol. Although if you're very traditional, you could go up to the presentation in the temple on the 2nd of February, Candlemas. And on the 6th of January I shall just do the Epiphany, We Three Kings, What Child Is This, and I might well do the first Noel as well. So we'll just add a bit to it. So until then, God willing, as always, may God bless you all. Amen.